If everyone could take their seats, please. We'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the CUSD 201 Board of Education. Today is December 10th, 2019, and roll call, please.
Mr. Armstrong.
Here.
Mrs. Charlton.
Here.
Mrs. Coyle.
Here.
Mr. Price.
Here.
Mr. Rudy.
Here.
Mrs. Strohmeyer.
Here.
Ms. Wilson.
Here.
Thank you.
If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to go out of order a little bit. The first thing we're going to do is a wonderful thing that we're going to do, is we're going to have the resolution to accept a donation. So let's do, here's what we're going to do. So the first thing, so we have some good news to share with the community. Okay. So Jerry Heckbush was a Heckbrush. Okay, I can't even read my own handwriting. Was a science teacher at Westmont High School for 27 years and was a founding member of the Westmont High School faculty. Charles Huck Heckbrush proudly served as a in the U.S. Navy in World War II and had a distinguished career at Argonne Labs. In the recent past, we have found that following the passing of Jerry and Hack, District 201 has been named as a beneficiary of the Hackbrush Family Trust. The Hackbrushes, through the trust, have generously donated 25% of the family trust to Westmont High School to be used for educational purposes. The amount of the donation is upwards of $250,000. The amount will be determined after taxes, but a little bit over $250,000. So first of all, thank you. Since Jerry was a science teacher, the thought is to take a look at the educational needs of the science department and/or other educational needs of the high school. By the way, we are showing pictures of Jerry through the years when she was a teacher here. I thank everybody who looked through yearbooks and such. So, to this end, an oversight committee will be formed to discuss the current educational needs of the high school and/or entertain suggestions as the best way to use that funds, again, keeping in mind the desires of the Hackbrush family. So the committee will be comprised of Jack Balderman as the principal, Kevin Carey as the superintendent, myself as the board president, Lori Erasmus, who is a current science teacher at Westmont High School and was a student of Jerry. Are you in any of those pictures?
Not yet.
Okay. And Jamie McBoone, who is also a student of Jerry's. So, and then just once the committee has formulated a plan, then we will bring that back to the Board of Education for approval. So now I would just like to invite, first of all, I would like to introduce Kathy Carroll, who is with us tonight. She is the one of the co-executors of the trust, and we've been working with her, and thank you for your time in that. And then I would like to invite Lori and Jamie to maybe say a few words about Jerry. So if you want to come on up and
Well, thank you for having us tonight. We are honored. I think I can speak for the both of us and say that we're both honored. We were asked to represent the high school on this committee. I was fortunate enough to be a student of Jerry's in her freshman biology course. Well, that was a while ago. I won't tell you how long ago. But at that time, biology was not a freshman course. It was, you were enrolled based on recommendation by the junior high school. So I was enrolled in Jerry's freshman biology course, and I struggled a bit because the class was comprised of all upperclassmen, and it was definitely, it provided a lot of anxiety for me throughout my day. But Jerry really helped me to learn that it was okay to be smart, and it was okay to push yourself and to rise to any occasion, and really to have that faith and confidence to continue to pursue your dreams. I had some conversations with a few of my friends I had while at Westmont High School as a student, not as a teacher. And I was reminded of the fact that Jerry was very nurturing, especially to the female students she was fortunate enough to have. She went out of her way to make sure that female students were aware of all the opportunities that existed in the field of science. As one of my friends put it, she prompted girls to explore STEM careers before STEM was even a concept, and before there were sustained pushes to get girls into STEM. And that just speaks to the fact that Jerry really is someone that over the years I've looked up to, my peers have looked up to, and now, without a doubt, given the fact that we are very lucky to receive the benefit that Jerry has laid out for us, no doubt we will continue to remember Jerry over the years, well into the future.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me as well. I would echo Jamie's sentiment. I specifically wrote my notes for tonight on my Science Careers in Search of Women notepad from Argonne, which I was fortunate enough to attend with Mrs. Heckbrush as both a student and early on in my teaching career. She asked if I would tag along in one of her final years at Westmont High School when I was actually getting my start as a teaching assistant. She said, "I think you should join us." And as we were kind of waiting for the students to attend their session, she directly looked over and said to me, "This is important for them. This is important for them to see all of these pathways for women." And I remember her telling stories of her firsthand experiences being very often the only, if not maybe one of a couple of women in science courses during college and graduate school. And so it was an area of passion for her to inspire and encourage women to get involved in science. I'm actually going to start with a little story that sounds bad at the beginning, but trust me, it gets better. I also had Mrs. Heckbrush for freshman biology, and then I also had her for advanced biology during my sophomore year in anatomy and physiology. And one practice that Mrs. Heckbrush always maintained, I don't remember her ever missing a day, whenever we took a test, she always had it graded to hand back the next day. Yes. And I have been, with very few exceptions, I'll admit, that is something that I have carried into my classroom at Westmont High School. Mrs. Heckbrush always handed tests back in score order, which is a practice I don't carry on today. I know I have your children or have had your children, so rest assured I hand them back randomly in this day and age. And she handed them back in reverse score order. So the last people to get their tests back were always the highest scores. Well, it didn't take high school students very long to catch on to the fact that that's how they were being handed back. And I remember my sophomore year, and I don't remember the reason, but I was less than prepared for a test that we had in anatomy and physiology. And she was about halfway through the pack, and she stopped at my lab table, and I thought, oh gosh, she's only in the middle of the pack. And she laid my test on my desk, and she stopped just for a second, long enough for me to look at my score. It was a C. To look at the score and look up at her and see her kind of look raise her eyebrows and lower her chin a little bit and give me the slightest nod, and then she just moved on. She did not say a word, and in those 3 seconds that she paused and nodded, she said to me, "This is not your best effort, and you can do better," and I will be darned if I never got a C on anything in her class from that point forward. She was so passionate about science and her content area, and she knew the importance of it, even all those years ago when we were students, and I'll keep the years out of it as well. Thanks, Jamie. She knew that it was going to be a big part of our lives, and she, even back then, would talk about climate change and tell us, you guys have to fix this. This is important. She was just so passionate about science, and it does not surprise me one bit that she wanted a portion of her estate to go to Westmont High School, where she spent her career, inspiring and encouraging students to get involved. She was the sponsor of NHS for many years and actually started the NHS chapter at Westmont High School and encouraged students to always be giving back and be thinking of others. And so we are very fortunate, and we'd like to thank the Family Trust for the gift that they've bestowed upon Westmont High School.
So, in keeping with the business end of this, we have a resolution that we have to read, and then we will proceed. So this is the resolution approving a gift from Charles and Jerry Lynn Hackbrush through the Hackbrush Family Trust. Whereas Jerry Hackbrush worked for and contributed to District 201 for 27 years as a science teacher and was a founding member of the Westmont High School faculty. And whereas Jerry's husband of 45 years, Charles Frederick Hackbrush, proudly served in the United States Navy in World War II, followed by a distinguished career working for Argonne National Labs. And whereas the community and this district are eternally grateful for Jerry's invaluable contributions to District 201. And whereas yet another invaluable contribution following the passing of Hack and Jerry, District 201 has been named as a beneficiary to the Hackbrush Family Trust. And whereas Hack and Jerry Hackbrush, through the Hackbrush Family Trust, have generously donated 25% of the Hackbrush Family Trust to Westmont High School to be used for educational purposes as determined by the Hackbrush Family Trustees. And whereas the Hackbrush Family Trustees have determined that the donation can be used to benefit the educational needs of Westmont High School, as will be determined by representatives of the district. Whereas pursuant to Section 16-1 of the School Code, the board is authorized to receive donations for use in whatever manner the board chooses. And whereas pursuant to Board Policy 8-80, gifts to the district, donations that are compatible with the board's educational objectives and policies may be approved by the board. And whereas the board has determined that it is in the best interest of the board, Westmont High School, its students, and the entire District 201 community to accept the donation. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education of Community Unit School District 201, DuPage County, Illinois, as follows. Section 1, the board has determined that it is in the best interest of the board, Westmont High School, its students, and the entire District 201 community for the board to accept the donation. Section 2, pursuant to Section 16-1 of the School Code and Board Policy 8-80, gifts of the district, the board hereby gratefully accepts the extraordinary gift of the donation from Charles and Jerry Lynn Hackbrush through the Hackbrush Family Trust. 3, the board president, superintendent, and treasurer of the district are hereby authorized to sign such documents on behalf of the board as are necessary to complete the board's receipt of the donation. Section 4, this resolution is in full force and effect upon its passage. So I would at this time like to entertain the motion to approve the resolution to accept the donation from Charlie and Jerry Lynn Heckbrush through the Heckbrush Family Trust.
So moved.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong,
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mrs. Stromeyer,
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, can you come around here?
Sure.
So I'd like to invite Ms. Jan Carroll to come up for a moment and just accept this resolution. And with many thanks on behalf of the students, community, the teachers, and thank you very much. So if we could get a photo, if you could come on up here. So thank you so very much, so very much. Thank you again. And,
I just wanted to say, I'm very honored to represent these very longtime family friends of ours. The only sadness for me is that they're not here to give this recognition. But when you said passionate, I knew when Jerry and I, we would talk because I was an educator also. And I knew she was passionate about her time at Westmont High School. So it was not surprising to me that it was part of their trust. And really, just very honored to represent them here and really their generosity.
well, her passion will live on.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Jan.
Gotta say, that's nice to do that, okay? Just, it's a nice piece. It's also wonderful to hear how our teachers and students have gone on with their education. We have two of her students right here as our teachers, so. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the public hearing on the tentative tax levy. Thank you. Okay. The president of the Board of Education calls the public hearing to order regarding the proposed 2019 tax levy. Business manager Kim Anderson will review the proposed 2019 tax levy.
We did a notice in the newspaper on November 28th, and the total levy amount is $26,795,000, 95 million, sorry, and 18 million for educational fund, 3 million for O&M fund, 1.2 million in the transportation fund, 400,000 municipal retirement fund, 475,000 in the social security fund, 120,000 in tort, and 3.6 million for special education. Does anybody have questions on that?
Okay, the president asks, are you done, Kim, with your thing? Okay. The president asks if there are additional comments from the members of the Board of Education regarding the proposed 2019 tax levy. The president asks if there are any public comments concerning the proposed 2019 tax levy. Okay. The president then declares that the public hearing on the proposed 2019 tax levy is closed. Okay. Approval of minutes. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the November 12th, 2019 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the first closed session of the November 12th, 2019 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carry. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the second closed session of the November 12th, 2019 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, are there any public comments? I don't have any cards. Are there any cards? Okay, are there any public comments? Public comments. In
Regarding
general.
anything you want.
In general.
I'm sorry, the first one you asked regarding the ones on
Hi, I'm Dana Hajak. I'm a Manning parent. I have 2 kids there, and I'll have a 3rd there next year. I'm here to ask the board and the superintendent to reconsider and reassess the class size limits that are currently in place with the newish data and knowledge that we have. Classes at both Manning and Miller at multiple grade levels have had class sizes at or near the current maximums in recent years. It is important that staff, especially staff that has had classes at or near these limits, be included in the conversation as they are integral in interpreting any and all data that we have regarding these years. It is important to remember that some of the research relied on to put the current limits in place are 10 or more years old, namely Visible Learning by John Hattie. Any educator who has been teaching for the last 10 or more years will tell you that a lot has changed in that time, and it is important to consider this when making these guidelines. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other public comments? Thank you.
So, kind of piggybacking on that whole thing.
Could you first just state your name?
I'm sorry, my
because-
name is Tracy Lopez. So, my daughter is a 2nd grader at Manning, and in my opinion, it's not going well. The classroom is very crowded. A lot of distractions are going on. We're now in December, and she's still telling me all about these things that are happening in the classroom. And she wants to learn, and she can't. She's been a good student. She's been a Manning Meteor Award winner for kindergarten and 1st grade. So she's respectful, responsible, and safe. She's also kind, shy, and very sensitive and quiet. So she's been crying going to these classes and stuff. She comes home, she tells me, "Can we talk?" And she wants to talk about what happened and how so-and-so was arguing and things like that. And it upsets me, as you can tell, sorry. She's been forgotten not forgotten physically, but in the capacity of a library situation. She was, apparently there was a good list, and she was completely dismissed and forgotten on the good list that she should have been, and she was upset and crying. So I'm not sure if it's the kids that are distracting that get the attention, and the quiet kids just sort of like fall under the radar. So I would ask that, plead that next year we consider going back to 3 classes because it's just not a good year. I loved Manning, kindergarten and 1st grade, but 2nd grade is a really different situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other public comments? Thank you.
So my name is Jessica Dorner, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is kind of picking off of the meeting that we had in April about why they were going back or going to 3 class sizes, or sorry, 2 class sessions instead of 3. So I just have, I guess it's kind of like a follow-up to this, so I'm not sure this is appropriate arena to do it, but I don't know where else you go to discuss your opinion, so that's why I'm here. So I have basically 3 things. Initially, we were told that it was a financial situation, that's why it happened, that we were trying to save money, not we, the district was. So I'm just curious, has anything else been discussed? Is there any other solutions to the problem financially? Have we come up with any other plans besides eliminating sessions and making class sizes larger? My second thing is that we were going off of, and I'm going to say his name probably wrong. Is it Hattie? And I just did some research on him because I like Google, I guess. And he was a college professor. He never once taught in elementary school. He never had anything to do really with the elementary schools. And we were basing it off his opinion that he made in 2008. He did update the information in 2011, but are we using any kind of data that shows it came from a professor or someone that had information and from an elementary school background that said class sizes don't affect student learning? Because I am a teacher, and I teach classes that have 18 students, and I teach classes that have 32 students. And I can tell you there's a severe difference of what I can get done and accomplish in a classroom of 18 versus a classroom of 32. So I guess it's my personal background and that asking, I don't agree with that. So I was just wondering if we had any other current research, again, from someone in an elementary school building that says that doesn't matter. And third, I was wondering, perhaps, instead of just the parents going off what the students are saying, could a board member go into a second grade classroom? I don't know if that's allowed. It's allowed at my school, but I don't know if it's allowed in this school. But can a board member go to the school and sit in a second grade classroom for the whole day and see what it's like to have 26 second graders in the room all at one time and what they can accomplish and not accomplish? And again, mostly just so you could see that it does affect the learning. And I don't actually have anything against the teachers whatsoever. I think they're doing a great job. I enjoy the principal. I have nothing against any of them. This is not a personal attack. And I personally emailed the principal at the school in Manning and said I was coming here to say this. I have nothing against what they're doing. I just have a problem with it happening for financial reasons. When we are actually a district that is small class sizes and everyone wants to be small class sizes, why would we suddenly go back to huge class sizes when everyone's trying to go the opposite direction? And I'm willing to go call surrounding school districts and ask them, what is your class sizes in 3rd grade? I will do all the legwork to figure out if we are competing with the other surrounding school districts in our area. I'll do that if that would help. If no one else, I'm more than willing to start calling people, though they might think I'm a little strange, but I'll do it. I mean, I'll explain to them and tell them why I'm calling. But I already have some information on other schools because I have other people that teach in surrounding districts near here. So I already have it started. So if that would be helpful in any which way, I'd be willing to help out. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other public comments?
I'm Andriana McDowell, and I'm also here with the other 2nd grade moms from Manning. I have a son named Alex, and last year was our first year at Manning, transferred over from Miller, and he had been struggling, and we noticed last year he was in a smaller class size of 15 at the beginning, and I think by the end there were only 17 students, and he thrived, and he has never done so well. Kindergarten he struggled, at Miller he struggled, and at Manning finally we felt like we were getting the progress we needed to see. His test scores improved, and this year we're noticing that he is sliding backwards again. His test scores are worse, his focus is worse, he isn't reading as well as he was reading last year, so I agree with them, and I feel we need to be looking at the class sizes. I see it in my son, and I hope we can rectify this and see him improve and succeed and get a good foundation for his future. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other public comments? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Number 1, personnel recommendations. 2, approval of student tour requests. 3, approval of board travel expenses. 4, renewal of SSCIP insurance agreement. 5, approval of fiduciary liability insurance coverage. 6, approval of AFR shared services or outsourcing requirement report. 7, approval of additional November 2019 expenditure report. 8, approval of the December 2019 expenditure report. And 9, ratification of November 2019 regular payroll.
So moved.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mr. Armstrong,
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mrs. Stromeyer,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the first item for discussion is the presentation of the fiscal year 2019 audit.
Hi, good evening. Susan Jones from Miller Cooper is here to present the 2019 audit.
Good evening, everybody. There's 3 deliverables in your packet. One is the audited comprehensive annual financial report of the district, and then there's 2 letters, our required communications letter as well as our management recommendation letter. I'm going to just take you through briefly a few of the highlights of the financial report. So if you go in your packet, it's actually the page right before the financial section tab. There's the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting that the district received for their June 30th, 2018 financial report. And this is an award given out by ASBO International. And with the filing of the 2019 financial report, the district is submitting for that award again, and there's really no reason that they shouldn't get it again. But there's a lot of work that goes into this large report, and I want to thank the district staff for answering all our questions, being prepared for the audit, and all the transparency they provide us during the execution of the audit. Past that first tab is our audit opinion, which is page 1. Consistent with prior years, it is an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance the district can receive. The last couple of years, there's been extra paragraphs in the opinion because of new accounting pronouncements. There were no new accounting pronouncements that had to be adopted by the district in 2019. The next section is management's discussion and analysis, and that goes from pages 5 through 18. But past that is the statement of net position of the district on page 19. This has all the assets, including the long-term assets, the capital assets of the district, as well as all the liabilities, including all the long-term debt of the district. And the net position at the end of 2019 was $10.1 million, which was a decrease from the previous year of $1.9 million. Past the statement of net position, if you turn to page 21 and 22, this is the balance sheet of all the government funds. Each of the major funds of the district are on pages 21 and 22. And you can see on a combined basis at the end of 2019, the district had a combined fund balance of $17.8 million, which was a decrease of $800,000 from the previous year. If you look to page 24, this has all the revenues and expenditures of the district. And the district, if you look at the general fund, had deficit spending during fiscal year 2019 of $1.1 million. And that's 2 years in a row that the district did have deficit spending. Last year, deficit spending was around $800,000. All of the other funds had basically a little bit of a break-even balance. It's really where the operating funds is where the deficit spending occurred. Turning to page 29 begins the notes to the financial statements, and those go all through from pages 29 to 81. And again, you wanted to dive a little bit deeper into any significant financial statement line item. There's a lot of information in these notes to the financial statements. I did want to point out just a couple things. On page 53, there's just a lot of talk with what's going on in the state and the new administration of the state. There's still a lot of discussion related to the pension and the teachers' retirement plans. And I just wanted to point out a couple things on page 53. The total pension liability associated with the teachers' retirement system related to the district on page 53 is approximately $105 million. What's recorded in the statement of net position as the district's portion at the end of 2019 is $1.5 million. So when they talk in the news about that pension liability, shifting possibly, that's kind of that number that, possibly might shift in future years. And then the next thing I wanted to point out is on page 68. The teacher's health insurance security plan, which is also another plan at the state level, that liability in total related to the district is $35.6 million, and that's more of a 60-40 split between the district and the state. So the district's portion of that liability, which is recorded in your financial statements, is $15.2 million, and the state's portion is $20 million. So for the pension plan related to the teachers, the state's currently, has a greater proportion than they do for the health insurance plan. Past the footnotes to the financial statements is all the supplemental information, which has all the required information related to a lot of actuarial assumptions around all the pension plans, both IMRF and TRS, as well as there's a deeper dive in all the budget to actual schedules of all the individual funds. Does anybody have any questions on the financial statements? Then I'll turn to the first letter that I want to go through. It's our required communications letter to those charged with governments. We did execute our audit in accordance with government auditing standards. Based on executing our audit, we do consider the internal controls of the district. We don't issue a separate opinion on internal controls, but we didn't identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. We have some minor recommendations that we'll go through in our second letter. Turning to page 2 of this letter, we are independent of the district, and our audit was executed consistent with what we set out to do in our engagement letter. All significant accounting policies have been disclosed in the notes to the financial statements. On pages 2 and 3, there's a series of new GASB statements that are coming out that are going to impact the district over the next couple of years. We'll work with the administration to make sure those are all adopted correctly in the next couple of years. None of them are going to have a major impact on the financial statements other than fiduciary activities where student activity accounts might be, right now they're a fiduciary fund outside of the district's funds, but potentially those could be recorded in the general fund, but that's still kind of the implementation of that is still being discussed. On page 4 of the letter, we are required to disclose to you any differences we identified that weren't recorded in the financial statements, and there were none. We had no disagreements with management, and when we went final on the audit report, we did receive a representation letter from management. And then moving to the second letter, which starts out in planning and performing our audit. As I mentioned, we didn't identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. We had one kind of blocking and tackling item where when we were doing our pension testing, we noticed in one of our samples there were certain certified wages that weren't reported to TRS correctly, but management reran the calculation and provided the correct information to TRS. And then the last item is an item that we're including in all our entities, all our clients' management letters, and it's something that I talked about last year as well. It's just always continue to be alert for phishing scams and IT risk, because they're getting more and more sophisticated, more and more creative, making sure there's, training of employees to make sure they understand, what's confidential information. Keep consistent with your processes and controls, because it is impacting a lot of organizations financially. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you very much.
I have one question, and I don't know if it, Kim or, could you just, for the purposes of discussion in the community, can you, or Kim, explain exactly to the community what deficit spending is?
Deficit spending is when our revenue is lower than our expenditures. So our expenditures are exceeding the amount of money that we're taking in.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we are talking about that. And then the second thing is, I actually, I did read this, and I did find it interesting, the piece, and I know you talked about it last year, about the controls on the, all the computers and the phishing and all that. Do we, I take it we have some controls in place, and are we continuing with
We do, yes.
training in that?
Yes, and I'm working with Nadine too to make sure that everyone's up to speed on these types of things as
Okay.
well.
Okay, great, thank you.
And one of the things that we do have in part of the SKIP policies that you approved today, there is cyber liability coverage as well, so.
I have a question on the audit itself. So for the management, I'm a new board member, so my first time looking at an audit. For management's discussion and analysis unaudited, that section, is that written by our district?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everyone.
You too. Okay, then the next item is presentation of monthly financial statements.
It's me. All right. Okay, so for the month of October, the district received $485,000 from the state. There were no fiscal year 19 payments vouchered, and there were $216,000 of fiscal year 20 payments vouchered but not released. We also received another installment of the 2018 tax levy in the amount of $648,000. So total property taxes collected are $23.4 million. That's a 97.18% collection rate. The last 2 years, we received 97.28 and 97.10 at this time, so comparable. In the Ed and Tort funds, revenues are slightly higher than the prior year average at this point in time. We received $97,000 of fiscal year 19 payments and $387,000 of fiscal year 20. $120,000 of that is for evidence-based funding. And then there were no fiscal year 19 payments vouchered and $61,000 of fiscal year 20 payments vouchered. In the O&M fund, revenues are comparable to the prior year average. The transportation fund, we did not receive any payments from the state during the month of October, and there's $155,000 of fiscal year 20 payments vouchered. In the Ed and Tort funds, expenditures are comparable to the prior year average. And then the O&M fund, we're 27.79% spent to date, and last year we were 28.14% spent to date. And then again, transportation funds, those expenditures vary year to year, month to month, based on the timing of receipt of invoices and payment. Fund balance overall is $23.8 million right now, and $13.4 million in the Ed fund. And then we have $22 million worth of investments as of the end of October. we have received, again, 97% of our, of our revenues so far for taxes. So you'll start to see that our investments will start to decline over as we continue on throughout the year, because we'll be spending that money down for our routine bills. And then the activity fund and lunch reports are there as well. Does anybody have questions? Okay.
If I could just have a second, Marie. I just wanted to let everybody know that the board finance committee met, it's Dana Strohmeyer and myself and Kim Anderson to talk about the deficit spending that we've been doing, to make sure that we are spending our dollars as wisely as we can. So we are looking at everything that we can possibly look at to make sure that we are spending the money correctly. We are looking at what the root causes of the deficit are. We're going to try to focus on it and see what kind of solutions we can come up with for it, because it's a real thing, and we need to start addressing it better so that we don't have to go through the cycle that we went through 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when we had to make some cuts. But I just wanted to assure everybody that we are meeting and we are focusing our energies in this direction.
Thank you. I just hope that, I didn't mean to step on your toes or anything, but I know that we know what deficit spending is. I think I just wanted to point out what that means in layman's terms, because it's a
It's very real.
legitimate, concern. So, okay, was that it? Then okay, then the next item for discussion is chiller replacement at Westmont High School.
All right, so we do have Joe Smith, who's our Director of Buildings and Grounds, here tonight. Also, if you have questions, but I'll just review the memo. We have one of the chillers at Westmont High School that needs to be replaced. It's this past August and September. There were multiple repairs to fix various leaks on the refrigerant side of the chiller, and it's not able to maintain a comfortable temperature in the building when outside temperatures are above 75 degrees. And so there's a concern that cooling may be impacted for this spring. So we're looking to replace that chiller. It's the estimated cost, including all associated fees, is approximately $340,000. We would have to go out to bid. We'd like to go out to bid as soon as possible so that we might be able to get it replaced over spring break. This is an item that's been on the capital projects list and life safety for many years, and it's come to that point where it needs to be replaced. So we did go through, and one of the things why it's so costly is because we'd have to have a crane come out to, put the unit onto the roof. There's a variety of sources for funding. There's $204,000 in the capital projects fund that can be combined with remaining working cash bond funds or funds from the O&M fund. If we do go that O&M route, we may have to amend the budget for that spending, or have the board, if our spending exceeds what you had authorized in the budget, you can do a resolution that say, yes, you authorize that extra spending. So that's where we're at this point in time. And so then there's an action item later for the board to kind of give us the approval. Or is there? I can't remember. But anyway, we'd like to just know that we're okay. No, there's not, that you're okay with us going out to bid, and then obviously the bid would come back to the board for approval.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I have more of a statement. So that's an expensive piece of equipment, and when we looked at our 5-year projects last spring, we only chose to do projects that were really life safety projects. This is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to projects. There's a lot of projects that we need to do with our roof in our buildings and many, many other expensive projects. And when I'm looking at our audit and the management's discussion on that, and it says factors bearing on the district's future, one of the lines that jumped out to me in that audit was the district currently has some of the oldest buildings in DuPage County. And we keep pushing off our projects until we have no choice. And so I think it's just another good reason to look at, and we currently have a deficit spending. So I think it's just another, I have no problem with this project in particular, but really looking at our maintenance that needs to be done and really prioritizing what needs to be done, that we can work with the funds that we have, because we'll keep getting memos like this. And this is a necessary, it sounds like it's a necessary thing that we need to do, but I would rather be proactive than reactive with our maintenance to our oldest buildings in DuPage County.
And no, go ahead, Joe.
So the memo says one of the chillers. How many chillers does the building have?
Hi. Okay, so the high school has 2 chillers. So the way that the chillers work is the chiller that we just replaced 5 years ago, that has 8 circuits of cooling in it. Okay, so that's a very high efficiency chiller. The chiller that we're looking to replace has 2 circuits of cooling. So currently, what the issue we had at the end of the year was that one of the circuits we could run, the other circuit we cannot run, and we cannot get it to run. The issue that we have is that we get a lot of leaks in that system. So when you introduce refrigerant to the system, if that leaks out, you're essentially throwing the money away. So what you do is you test the system with nitrogen first. And every time we put new nitrogen in, if we do it on a Friday, when we come back Monday, it's gone. And the leaks are not very obvious leaks. They're mainly in the bundle of the chiller, which is very invasive. So the main issue that we have is that when the temperatures are like 70, 75 outside, we don't have enough capacity to cool the main areas of the high school. Because of the design of the high school being so spread out, so open, it's very hard to get cooling in there as it is. The other issue was towards the end of the year, the newer chiller that has 8 circuits, we were running that at 100%, which you don't necessarily want to do because you're then overusing it. And that was the only way we could cool the building at the end of the summer. So in the spring, there's really no telling what we would be able to do comfort-wise with the school. We did try to, we did get some quotes to take the bundle apart and go through it, but honestly, I don't think it's worth it. The chiller needed to be replaced 5 years ago, in all honesty, and it wasn't. So as you said, I think this is going to be kind of a trend in the next few years without putting some effort into the buildings. I mean, this is one issue at the high school, but the junior high has its issues. Manning has its issues. You know, it's kind of unanimous. If there's any other questions, I mean, I can answer anything else.
So it's not impacting one location or one part of the
so,
building, or?
So it's not necessarily, so the chillers basically cool the water that supply all the fans in the school. So it's not specific to any portion of the building, but it basically runs the whole building. So all the water that runs through the fan systems in the school has hot water from the boilers and chilled water from the chiller. So that water gets fed throughout the whole building at a temp, like usually you want like 45 degrees. So our issue was that we were only able to maintain like 50, almost 60 degrees, which is very hard to cool the building with. So the chillers basically serve the whole school. It's not really specific to any section. It cools the whole school.
And you'd be looking for a unit that, you said the current one is two circuits?
So the one that we want to replace is 2 circuits. The one that we replaced 5 years ago has 8 circuits. So that gives you the ability to run at less capacity. So on a day where it's not so hot out, you can run 3 circuits as opposed to 8.
Okay.
So it's way more energy efficient. Another thing that we looked at is if we were to replace it with a new style chiller, there would be like $12,000 to $15,000 in rebates from ComEd just off of energy savings. Just because they're that much more efficient. So, that's a benefit.
How much lifespan are we gaining when we're not running a chiller at 100%?
It's hard to say. Typically, the lifespan of a chiller is 15 years. Depending on how much you spend off the bat, you could get 20, close to 25.
But having two efficient units would allow the current 8-circuit unit to last much longer.
Right, absolutely.
Otherwise, we're cutting into the service life of the newer chillers.
Right, which is kind of what, towards the end of the year, that was the only option. But yes, ideally, if we had 2 new chillers, I would say on a day where it's 80 degrees, it's a high heat, we could probably cool that with 6 total circuits. So 3 off of each, which is, typically how you would like to do it. Run both of them because chillers are kind of designed to run constantly. So you would like to run both of them just at minimal capacity. As it heats up, you can switch from one to the other, but that's kind of in a nutshell what we're dealing with.
Thank you.
So.
Okay, so we're just looking at direction from the board
Yes,
to go out
Go
to
for
bid,
bids,
and
right.
then when the bid comes in, it will be brought back to the board.
Yes.
Okay, so do we,
Yeah.
are we
Yeah.
in
Fine with
agreement
that,
on
yeah,
that?
let's do
Okay.
Great.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
So Kim, I know we had talked about maybe having another capital projects meeting.
Yes.
So should we try to get that something?
Yep, we will get that.
We'll look at
Yes,
something
go.
on that, but,
Yep.
okay. Okay, thank you. Then the next item is board reporting from the IASB conference. So, as we have done in the past, every year, the tri-conference is held at by the Illinois Association School Board, and we have a fantastic opportunity for us as board members as well as the administration to learn a lot of information in a very short period of time. So we like to take this time to have individual board members discuss and share with each other and the community some of the things that we have learned at this conference. There's a wealth of information there. So would anyone like to start?
I will.
Okay, Judy, thank you.
I attended 2 classes, and one was about the media, and it was actually called When the Media Circus Arrives, but it didn't have anything to do with that. And it was just ways to continue to communicate to the stakeholders, and it was very nice that everything that they mentioned, it was like, we do that already, and that was really a good one, though. The other one I did was e-learning, and it was really interesting because a board member that was a teacher stood up and said that she didn't care for it because she felt it undermined the teachers. But when you have a snow day, you really, it's really a good resource to have. But one of the things that they had gathered data on was having the students log in and submitting their times where they could track the times that they were actually on and actually studying. And each teacher had developed a web page and a link to the learning activities. And one of the things that they said to make special ed inclusive was, how do the special ed kids get their e-learning in? And if your child has speech therapy, the speech therapist will call. So it's not really a day off for the teachers either, but teachers also check in on the regular students via telephone. The only thing they really couldn't do was occupational therapy. So it was all very good. I was glad I went.
Okay.
I'll go
Anyone?
next.
Okay.
I'll report on two of the sessions that I went to. One was about learning the art of school boarding, which was a session that was focused more for new members. And one of the things that I gathered from that takeaway was the importance of really directing concerned parents to the administration and the superintendent, and making sure that we're not bypassing our administration and our superintendent, that we're keeping everyone in the loop and we're directing concerned parents to the appropriate places, which I thought was great. Another really interesting session that I went to was called Crisis to Comeback, and it was the story of a Lamont school district who was in a financial crisis and really their comeback from that. As a side note, I have a friend of a friend who served on that school board during that time where they had to make some really tough cuts, and I've talked with him over the phone before I came on the board, knowing that we were walking into a deficit. I was walking into a board that had a deficit. And it was really painful to hear of some of the cuts that district had to make. They were in a much different much worse financial situation than we are. But it was a warning to really work on our deficit and really focus on getting our finances in line. One of the things that the district had to do, which really was highlighted in our public comment, was they had to drastically increase class sizes. Their average class size was over 35 students, in kindergarten all the way up. And how they really just had to make things work with very little. But they still maintained, they actually improved their academics during that time period when their class sizes were large, but they really had to do more with less. So it was a good, one of the things that they did to help turn around their finances was really partnering with their teachers union and really having to work together to make the finances move in the right direction. So I just thought that was a great session to go to, and a stern warning of the importance for long-term financial security, how when we're in a deficit, really trying to turn our ship and right the ship so that we don't have to make drastic cuts like that district did.
I attended, I like to always attend the one about the legislative changes that impact school districts, and it's kind of interesting to go to those sessions because you hear from districts from all over the state, especially when people get up and ask questions, and the challenges that they face are sometimes different and sometimes very similar to what we face. And so they talked about the specific legislation that came out of the fall veto session. A lot of it had to do with dealing with the teacher shortage in Illinois. And I know we don't always see that here, but a lot of districts are having problems recruiting and keeping teachers. And so they've made some legislative changes to help address that. They did some changes to some basic skills testing that they used to require for teacher licensing. And looking at reciprocity between, from other states, teachers that move into our state, allowing them to get into a career path with their current registration. Some substitute teaching licensures as well. And I think even before that, there was a bill that they passed to have a minimum salary for teaching positions throughout the state. So those are all issues that, I mean, we're fortunate not to have that problem, but it would really be a challenge if we couldn't fill teaching positions in your district. So talked a lot about budgetary type of things. They said there was going to be a $215 million maintenance grant that was available to districts, and it was a matching type of a grant where you had to provide, I think they said $50,000 from the district side, and the state would match $50,000. And so I don't know any details or if they released anything on that, but that was something they talked about. The overall budget is $12.6 billion. They talked about some small property tax relief program that's in the, that one I don't know the details on, but it had to do with some sort of rebate that went back to property, to communities. There was an increase almost 300 million of the transportation budget. And then they also discussed some of the issues having to do with the exclusion rooms. There was a large article in the Tribune having to do with student isolation and exclusion rooms and their use, and then the Board of Education of the state banned them, and then they came back and made some modifications, and so there's been a lot of change and discussion on that particular topic at the state level. Looking forward to the upcoming legislative session, a couple of the things that they talked about was somehow encouraging districts to have census nights because 2020 is a census year, and to try and encourage citizens or provide space for them to come in and fill out census online responses and that sort of thing, to try and make sure that communities are capturing all of the federal dollars that they're entitled to by having an accurate census. They said that increase for the evidence-based funding was 50 million over the minimum amount that they anticipated. They talked a little bit about possibly having FAFSA completion as a requirement for graduation from high school, so that every student leaving high school would leave with that application complete, and gives them an opportunity to learn more about it before they leave high school. And then there was legislation for pension fund, a lot of municipal pension funds, to consolidate a lot of the administrative functions of those funds that passed, and they'll be dealing with the implications of that, and hopefully the savings that will go along with that as a pension change that is constitutional. And then, of course, there'll be more discussion about ethics reform in state government. That's kind of a perennial thing. So, but it's interesting to hear from other districts the challenges that they're facing.
Okay.
Well, as you know, I'm the delegate to for our school board, so I did go to the delegate assembly. There was 451 delegates in the room, so it was a large meeting for us, and we did vote on a number of the things, a number of the topics that they want to present to the Illinois government for approval. You should know, and I know most of you already know this, but the legislation to suggest arming school personnel did fail again. It's the same arguments in the room every time. The rural districts want that local control so they can decide security issues for their schools, and most board members don't want that to be a school board decision. They want it to stay a state decision. So it did fail. It was 249 to 198, so it was close, not as close as it was last year, but it still failed. On a couple of the smaller notes, Marie, I know you had asked about this because it was the neighboring district that brought it up, but the school safety, the traffic zones, that was adopted.
Yeah, okay.
It was actually debated. Believe it or not, it was debated. It was pulled off the consent agenda and debated. I was a little surprised by that, but same thing with the school board elections for seating new board members and the terms of board members. As it turns out, the terms of board member, there's one district, I think it was just one district, that has 5-year board members, and the board member gets elected in March, but he can't get seated till June. So they wanted to align that with all the other districts, and that, believe it or not, was debated also. Okay, but it was adopted. And the seating of new board members, the legislation that they want to put that you can seat them right away if there is no challenge in the election, that was adopted also. So we'll see if all those do pass. But it was interesting to learn that of the 451 delegates that were there, that only represents 53% of the school districts in the state. So I would have thought there would have been a lot more districts there, but only about half the districts attend this tri-conference. So I wonder what would happen if more of them attended.
You can't
from
be
Penn
heard
State.
if you're not there. Right?
That's correct.
So I have a question. How could there be discussion against this about the safety?
I'd rather not go there.
school?
I'm not sure it was a good argument. I'm just
Okay.
going to leave it alone and move on. I mean, all they want to do is be able to, put up additional signs and not have time restrictions on the signs and things like
Right,
that. And
right.
that was basically the argument. Well, if school's not in session, why do we have to follow these speed limit laws?
Okay.
So,
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a couple things. I went on Friday, again, I saw Dana on Friday too, and so I will preface this by saying that this is my 11th year of going to these. And so I will say for the record that I have done all the financials and all the other things. This one was on the happiness factor, and I thought that was a very good session to try. And it was really good. It was very engaging. Turns out I had seen our attorney. He was across the hall, saw him at break, and he said, "Oh, you're in that room over there. It sounds like you guys are having fun over there." But it was really interesting, especially when you have some of these really good speakers that come in and they talk about the happiness factor. And of course, this guy has a whole program. But what he talked about was how the brain works, and how when you get up in the morning and, when you look at yourself in the mirror for the first time, do you decide that this is going to be a good day? Or are you stating how the day is going to be right before you even start, before you've even spoken to anybody? So another thing he talked about was when people talk about engaging with other people, and there's very few of us that don't have either jobs or families or whatever, where we always have to engage with other people. And he said that one thing that he has tried to promote is, instead of seeing differences, start look at commonalities in the group. So he says whenever he does that, he tries to instill that. He touched a little bit about, like, in schools, we cannot make people happy. We as a person cannot make anybody happy. You can't make anyone in your family happy. But he had challenged all of us in the room to try to create an environment that motivates people and to give positive outliers, because happiness is a choice, and that should be a district priority. So I do like when I see things happening in our district, and I know I like to be a big cheerleader for that. Like last night, for instance, the high school had a dodgeball tournament, and it was not really, it was just something the kids did. They got together to try to raise some money, and it was incredible to see. Turns out there were about 9 of us parents there, so lucky. But these kids were having so much fun, and they were working together, and to just watch what happens when someone lost and they would shake hands. Now that goes on all the time, but it kind of reminded me of that when I thought about this presentation tonight. The other one I went to change the game with Twitter, and when I got there, Kevin was there. And so it was interesting. It was one of the shorter things, and they just talked about social media and other different ways to get your message out. And to the extent similar to what Judy said, sometimes it's really nice to go and find out that what we're doing is being done well. So obviously, there's always room for improvement. There was one also that I went to that was called, and the way these things through the years, the way they talk about them and then what you go to see could be completely different. But one was called Closing the Knowing/Doing Gap. And it was talking about making the leap from knowing what is right and doing what is right. And it wasn't the best presentation I ever went to, but the overall piece was sometimes we know what's right, and sometimes you have to kind of look at what the obstacles are to doing it. Now, obviously, there's financials and all that kind of stuff. And then the last thing that I went to, I'm going to just pass around some pieces. I went to a board president's roundtable, and I don't have enough copies, so maybe if you guys could share. But it reminded me of a meeting that I had gone to before, basically on effective meetings and productive boards. So the piece that, and I don't want to go over all of this, but what I wanted to do is just give the board these pieces, and I would like to, talk in the future, at a future board meeting about it. But a couple things that jumped out, and I provided copies of those. On page 5, it talks about the meeting of the board. And so there's a couple of things here that I would like for us to talk about in the future, maybe in the near future, putting on board docs that gives our community information. So for instance, one of those, the first one on page 5, talks about the meeting of the board and how that it is a meeting that the board works on, but it is not an open meeting. And so it talks about being respectful and allowing the community to speak, but it also talks about why, or the piece that why the board doesn't engage in that avenue, because a lot of times people have the board and the administrators have no idea what is coming to the board. So there's a couple things there, and the other one is on page 6 at the top. And Dana, it's interesting that you had talked about what you had talked about at your meeting. This one, it's concerns from the community and the staff, and it also discusses how it's very important for the board to get the information out to the community that when there is an issue, just basically what the chain of command is. So there's a couple things that I have been just kind of toying with and just kind of thinking about how we can use our board docs to be a more effective tool in reaching out to the community. And then I think, do you have one more page in there, or is it page 10? Is that right? Yeah, okay. So the other thing was, and this is something that I brought up once before, it talks about optional agenda formats and just different ways. First of all, let me go back to the other one. It was interesting when they were talking about this. There are still boards out there that do not allow public comments. So I found that interesting.
That's legal?
I don't think so.
Doesn't seem legal to me.
Well,
It's legal, but.
Ethical.
well, there's legal and ethical. And, and it's interesting just from where our board has gone with things like that. There are very few boards that tape their meetings or have them televised in any way. So, I mean, again, it was another reminder at this roundtable of board presidents. But there were a couple things that, again, I don't want to bring it up tonight. I just want to throw some ideas out there that I would kind of like to, as I'm getting into the waning years of my job here, in terms of just kind of looking at our agenda, because a lot of times we do the same thing over and over and over again. But one of the things when they talked about, like the last one is, what your focus could be on student performance. One of the things that I have always wanted to do is to periodically maybe have a couple students in, maybe doing some reading from things that they've done, maybe a class come in and do a song or something along that venue. This is a meeting, and it's a meeting that we have to get work done. But once in a while, I would like to just try to think about a way to showcase something that's going on in our district. And I'm not looking to do anything every meeting, because that also ruins the effectiveness of it. And so I just want to kind of just throw some things out there, again, to talk about at a different date, about other ways to look at our agenda that we work with. There's suggestions here, old business, new business. Now, of course, that's always tricky, because you don't want to just have anything spring up on anybody, because that completely defeats the whole no surprises avenue. But it was something to think about, and we talked about at the board president's roundtable. So I wanted to bring it to everybody, and I think we'll put something on the agenda for a future meeting, but I just wanted to give you guys this to see if anybody had any thoughts as we move forward to make our meetings here as productive as they can be. So that's what I have. Okay, let's move on if everyone has finished. All right, now, this is fun. We're doing this earlier and earlier, aren't we? We are going to look at the 2020-2021 school calendar.
Right. And the calendar committee has submitted 2 calendars for the board to review. This will give the opportunity for the board to review them, ask any questions, and then in January, the board will approve the 2021 school year calendar. But the 2 options are very similar, both option A and B. The opening day of the school year would be August 17th, with the first day of student attendance August 19th. One minor change is the first SIP day would be calendar A, it's September 30th, and then calendar B, it's October 7th. Probably maybe a little bit more significant change is the winter break. Next year, January 1st falls on a Friday, so if calendar A, school will resume that Monday, January 4th, and then with calendar B, school would resume Tuesday, January 5th. So the students would have 1 extra day. Spring break would be the same, March 29th through April 5th, and then the last day of student attendance, if no emergency days are used, option A would be June 2nd, and then option B would be June 3rd. And so those are, the committee then prefers option A for the calendar.
So this one again, so the first day of school would be August 19th, but Teacher Institute Day is on the Monday.
Correct.
The 17th.
Correct.
I'm fine with calendar A. I don't
Yeah.
see why
Yeah.
going the extra Monday off.
Doesn't seem to make sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, so
Having
there's a
sat on-
vacation argument in there.
Having sat on the calendar committee last year, excuse me, I know how complex it is to think through every school's unique needs for scheduling. So if the calendar committee wants option A, fully support it. It's a complicated process.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too, just to talk about is I know that the principals and the administrators all work really, really, really hard to try to, at the beginning of the year, schedule everything so that things aren't overlapping. So I'm sure that they would appreciate, that we do this too. Having said that, I know this year there have been a couple of wrinkles just because of the new our athletic conference.
Right.
But
Right.
it is really good in a district that's a unit district where there could be families, in every school to try to look at that. So, okay, so we will vote on this at the next.
Yes,
at the
next board meeting.
Next board meeting. Okay, we will move on. Action items. Approval of athletic sponsorship. So are you doing that, Kevin, or Kim?
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
So, Dan McCullough made us aware that Chawa Orthodontics would like to sponsor our athletic programs at the high school. And in return, they would provide financial support for the purchase of uniforms or other athletic equipment. And in return, they've asked that we hang a banner inside the gym and then near the baseball field. And then they'd also like to set up a table at events so they can speak to our community members about their services. So, Dan McCullough recommends the sponsorship. He was not able to be here this evening. So I don't know if you have other questions about, yes.
So how long would this arrangement go on? I mean, if you put a banner up, there should be a time frame that it's there, because otherwise the next person or next group or next company,
Right.
we have to kind of establish that a little bit. And then I think I'm not sure if this is something we've really done in the past in this particular format. So I think we have to be, you know, open in saying that if it's something we're going to do, that we're trying it, and it doesn't mean we're always going to do it, or that the next, you know, business that comes along that wants to do this, that we're going to automatically say yes. So we just, you know, we just have to be flexible in our approach to it, I think.
Okay, and I can follow up with them and see, you know, the biggest thing is, do we want a sign in the gym? And then where does it go? I had Joe kind of look, it could go, I think, to the left of the scoreboard. There might be a spot for it. You know, like, we do have the advertising on the scoreboard, but then again, that's through the boosters, so that's a little bit different. And then, you know, I'm not sure exactly what type of community events they want to speak at, if they're talking about, you know, every game, you know, basketball, football game, that type of thing, or what. So if there's some parameters we want to place on it, I can go back to them and say approved with these restrictions, or...
Well,
I would definitely.
My questions would be, how big are the signs? How much money are they talking about potentially donating? I mean, I don't see that at all. I mean, those are kind of big things in my mind. I'm certainly open to it. Anybody that wants to help support the school in any way, I want to be open to it at least, okay? There are certain sponsors that I wouldn't be open to, but, you know, certainly, you know, there's nothing, this looks like to be a very good sponsorship, but, I mean, I don't know any of the parameters there.
All right,
I mean, I need some guidelines or something. And I agree with Joel, it shouldn't be in perpetuity. I think there's a sign in the junior high gymnasium that's from one of the old banks, and it's still there. Okay, that the bank no longer exists.
Right.
Okay? It's on one, at least it was the last time I was in the gymnasium there. So that's, I mean, I just think those things would be important to know. I mean, we don't have to write them in stone, but gotta have some direction.
It might not be a bad idea to have something that is more formulaic in place for sponsorship opportunities. It might invite other people to be willing to sponsor on a more grand level, a lesser level, whatever it is, but it's a way to make up some of our gap with our athletic department, especially funding for that.
Right.
I agree. I mean, I think if we're open to it, we could look at creating, you know, different levels with corresponding benefits, and that way we go into this knowing if we're going to give signage in the gym and a banner on the baseball field and whatever else it might be, a table at an event, that's worth X amount, so that we know the next people who come around, how we're going to treat that as well.
All right, I'll go back to Dan and have him.
Well, and I want to add to that too. I also think that, I agree with all of that. I think we should do that, because the thing that felt odd to me, they want to speak at to our community. And so I don't know what that means. Do they want to go to the next meeting and speak up about that? Yeah. So those are the things I think, because now we're starting to get into, like, do we want to sell the baseball field to, you know, Exxon, or, you know what I mean? It starts to go down that road of, how do we want to do that? And yes, we have signs that have been there forever. So if it's temporary, you could, like, I think, if I recall, and somebody who's been around for a while, correct me, I think the way the sports boosters did their thing was like you paid for like a year.
No, that was in perpetuity.
I think it was forever.
Yeah.
Well,
It was in the,
Which
I
is
remember,
why I was
the
bringing this up.
It's forever. It's for as long,
okay.
it was a
So,
one-time fee
I think
forever.
at that time we discussed, because somebody didn't pay, that can't be a thing. So it's probably time to do that, because there could be opportunities. I just hate to sound like we're selling out something, like speaking at community, because if we allow one person to set up a table, at where? At the board meetings, you know, at parent-teacher conference, you know what I mean? It's gonna start to get really wide. And who's gonna monitor that and all that? So I think looking at that would probably be a
Codifying
really good
sponsorship
idea.
opportunities
Yes.
makes sense.
Yeah. Because it might turn out that there's some people out there that would like to do something if we
made it available, a more
made it
structured
available. Right.
availability, right.
Exactly.
Have we ever done this as a district?
No.
I mean,
The
I do this,
PTOs have
I
done
do
it.
this a lot in my work, so if Dan needs help, I'm just gonna throw my, I mean, like,
Okay.
there's a kind of a formula for how you get to what you have and what you can sell it for, so I'm happy
All right,
to
so I'm gonna
throw
write
in
that down.
throw my hat in the ring
In a
to help
pen,
with that.
in a pen that you.
You said it on air.
Yeah, I did.
It just gets scary because now all, we're gonna like name the baseball fields and stuff like that. Although, someone's got a couple $1 million.
We'll take it.
Consider it, but you know what I mean? It's just, the whole piece about setting up a table,
Yeah,
that starts to get.
That's what I had, the
But also, we have to decide how it's gonna be beneficial to, what the benefit is to the district, to the group that it's supposed to benefit, and where those dollars can and can't be spent, and, how we're gonna get there. If we want any and all sponsorships to go towards, for athletics to go directly to athletics, that's fine. If we want to split that up between athletics and educational foundations, or whatever we want to choose to do, we can start to build some nice framework to hang this off of. And I think I don't think it would take long to put it together, given you can get online at any other district and see what the sponsorship opportunities are.
Right.
So,
Thinking about this, though, as we're talking out loud, there's a board policy about accepting donations that, like what we did tonight. Like the trust is specifically set up that it goes to educational funds, not,
You might
boiler
get more
rooms.
sponsorships too if you're more direct like that, because a lot of people always have that what if factor. Well, if I'm donating, do I really know it's going to the
Exactly.
band, or do I know it's going to the sports? Do I know? I mean,
Right, and that gets tricky because it's got to be, we have a board policy and there's state code about that.
Right.
So we have to, I guess, follow along that too, because, so I guess it's just, it kind of makes sense tying in what we did earlier.
Can we
about-
just ask a question or two of council on this topic and what they do in other districts and their experience? Because I'm sure we're not the first.
and I know we're done with the conversation. We want to move on, but I'm not really sure we should be letting anybody speak to the students who's, out of our control, shall we say?
Well,
Yeah, I don't think this was the students. I think they meant more like parents.
Like a table
Yeah,
ladder.
table
Speak
ladder.
at events, though.
Yeah.
Speak at events, that concerns me.
that's the point, where,
Right,
like,
right.
what's an event?
We'd have to,
Yeah.
define it.
Yeah, and someone would have to,
Yeah.
So I do want to just take a moment also to thank their generosity in wanting to donate money to our, that our conversation about how it works
Right.
has nothing.
Exactly.
It
Correct.
doesn't diminish
Reflects in
the
that way.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes, and I
Exactly,
just
yes.
was there today with Elle, and
Okay, that's where it is, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna
how it
now
happens.
do the.
and Elle could use another round of, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Of braces, but I do want to encourage donations. Just, I think
Right.
when we have questions like this, it's saying, oh, we have a policy that we need updated, or a handbook that we need to update to handle it.
I mean, the reality is this idea and them coming forward to us could start something entirely new for our district, so that's a great thing.
So thank you.
Well, the junior high PTO just did a very smaller version of that in terms of getting shirts for the kids. And a number of people donated, they had a thing, and then you donated and their name was on the back of the shirt. That's a much smaller version, but they had like, for this amount, for this amount, for this amount, so they decided to save their PTO funds, and
fundraise.
kids got great shirts, so.
Sweet.
Anyway.
I think we
Okay,
should
well,
also
that's good.
thank Dan, because I think it's cool that he put together the proposal and brought it forward.
Yep.
So thank
Yes.
you, Dan.
Yes, very good. All right. The next item is approval of proposed Westmont High School course offerings.
so Marie, are we then just tabling that?
Oh,
Because that is an action
well,
item?
yes, that's what because we can't take
Yeah, we'll table it.
a motion on that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have said that. So we're not taking action on it. Hopefully, we can take it up in the future. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the Westmont High School course offerings.
Jack Balderman was at the November board meeting and presented two proposals to the board. One for a digital literacy course, which would be coding for students, and then the other was a honors senior English course that will allow seniors to focus on their writing skills. Both courses would not require new staff or an increase in FTE. And then the annual costs would, each course would be about $500 in materials on an annual basis. And then there would also be, I'm assuming every year teachers can put in summer writing curriculum proposals. I'm assuming that if the board would approve the courses, the teachers would submit those. And that is something that we budget for each year, is the summer curriculum writing.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions on that? No. Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the proposed high school course offerings as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mrs. Stromeyer?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is basically a housekeeping item. Approving the authorization for the treasurer to pay additional December 2019 expenditures because we only have one meeting in December. Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to authorize and direct the treasurer to pay bills received in December 2019 for the 2020 fiscal year.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mrs. Stromeyer?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the resolution to adopt 2019 tax levy. The chair will entertain a motion to adopt the resolution setting the 2019 tax levy as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Stromeyer?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, approval of furniture contract. Kim, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, hold on. So, we did the safety and security renovations with our 2016 bonds, and we're a couple years beyond that. And the office spaces at Manning, Miller, and the high school just had the old furniture moved in there, and so we felt it was appropriate that they had furniture for those spaces, as well as, the high school had the whole office area renovated, and then there's also some additional storage cabinets at the high school that we need in the classrooms, because there was all that, a lot of the storage was out in those open areas and all built in, and we don't have that same type of structure now. So we have, through our co-op pricing, a quote for $118,489 with Frank Cooney Company for office furniture for those spaces. And interest earnings in the working cash fund from 2016 through October 2019 total $92,000. And a lot of times what you do and the way you get furnishings is off of interest income after you issue bonds. And so, and then the remaining working cash bond funds would be utilized for the balance of the purchase.
Any questions?
Kim, what else can the interest earnings from the working cash bond fund be used to?
Go for any of our other projects.
I'm struggling with this one. I think that, I'm sure the office spaces need furniture. $118,000 is a lot of money to spend, and I just think, I don't understand the full needs of our district and prioritizing what's the biggest need. I'm sure that, and this might be the biggest need, but $118,000 is a lot of money. And I don't know where it falls in line with the other priorities that our district has.
Does this, where did this fall, because taking it out of the bigger picture, where did this fall on so we had the money for the bond that we used for the buildings and stuff like that.
And we didn't go out and bid this stuff when we did all the other projects because we were waiting to see where everything came in. And we had people come in, like, we've had a couple different people come in and work with us on the pricing of things and doing this. And one person, we were not happy with what they had provided to us in terms of how spaces should be set up and stuff. And so people in my office have been working on this for quite some time.
But in the picture of, like, the bond money, so I know there was, when we had all the things, when we did the specific things we said, and there was always still a little bit of money left over. So going back, is that where this is coming from?
Yes.
This here, this specific item. So when we talked about when we went down the path of first going through the whole bond, the whole project, as it was, there was always, well, if there's money left over, there's all these things. And then we certainly have the capital development projects that are just a mile long. So I guess my question is, where does this fall on there? Because I know that we, at one of our capital projects meetings, we had talked about, there was a number of floating, the items are all, they're all over the place. There's a million needs. Then there was the discussion with Steve Cashman about the life safety and all that. So where does this fall? I mean, can we, unless people feel differently, can we look at the capital projects in its full capacity before we do this? I don't know if that makes sense, or
is this
a bygone conclusion?
Is this something that was planned for?
Yes.
But not line item budgeted based on whatever savings we could?
Because the spaces, the office spaces were remodeled. I mean, we
Right.
basically took old desks and put them in there, so you don't have any, transaction counters at Manning. Miller, again, the same type of thing. The setup would be a little bit different. Some people, Lindsay doesn't really have a true desk. I mean, there's some real pieces of furniture that need to be purchased out of this.
And that was always the plan, was to purchase this furniture.
Yep.
Right.
How old is the current furniture?
Oh, some of it's very old, like 20, 30 years old.
Right, because I remember we replaced some original desks, I think it was last year, and that was pretty sad to say. So, well, I'm fine with moving forward with it, but obviously, majority of the board.
Is there, okay, so I'll just ask this question. When we're talking about just this amount of money for these pieces, is there some way we could see what the pieces are? I mean, I don't want to pick and choose, but is it, on one hand, we talk about deficit spending, and then on the other hand, we're talking about this. So is it, I guess I'm looking at, I mean, I very, very strongly recall having discussions about if there's money left over, there's a number of things to be looked at. So and this was one of them. So I just wondered where the other items
There's
fall.
desks, filing cabinets, chairs, conference room tables. There's storage cabinets for classrooms, for books and things like that don't really have spaces. So that's the majority of.
And that's this?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess my question was, when we finished using the bond, that umbrella of all the bond money, then there was always X number of money left over. But there was still a list of things that we had talked about doing when all the bills were paid, if there was any money left over. So the question is, where are we in terms of the priority of this specific one with those other items that we talked about when the money's left over? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, this is one of the items that, I mean, this is one of those items because it was kind of included in the renovations that we did. We just never purchased the furniture to go in the new spaces that we created. So, you know, to me, it's just kind of, we waited to make sure we got all of the structural work done and made sure we had funds to do that, and then we kind of held off and this never got quite completed. So in my mind, it's completing a project that we, you know,
And I agree
did a
with
couple
you
years ago.
100%. But my question is, are there other items on that list that we're not doing? You know what I'm saying? And this is somehow at the top. Because we only have,
Right, and I think part of it is.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, part of it is, as Joe has said, part of it's the timing. This wasn't on the list because this was always part of the project, that after these spaces were completed, that furniture would go into the spaces, so, like in terms, like, it was always assumed that this would be done, and then those other projects would be reviewed.
So this is an unlisted line item in the completion of an overall project. Right.
But, I mean, I could go home and look at my notes, but I recall that, okay, once the, you know, the doors are finished and the locks and all those things, there's a number of items that we can look at for the remaining money.
Yeah, they have to go back to it, I don't.
That's what I'm saying. So that's how I recall. So I'm just wondering if this is, I agree 100% that there was all this talk about all kinds of other things. So that's what I'm saying is, so there's a list of things. So how did this one get to the top of the list of those things? That's what I'm saying.
I think because of the fact that people have not had the appropriate furnishings for a couple years now.
And I'm not saying that they don't. I'm saying that there's a list, there's a huge list of the overall capital projects. And yes, I do very strongly recall having I mean, if I'm the only one, I'm fine. But I just want to make sure that with the limited funds that we have, that we are making sure we're putting them in the highest priority, and that, you know, there's so many things.
Could we table this and get a list of priorities at the top 6R or something like that?
Well,
I
if we're
think then you're going back to, you know, the board picking and choosing every little thing that we're gonna be spending money on. And I know we approve everything and all of that, but their administration has come with a rationale and a request. I think we should just vote on it, and if it doesn't pass, then we can revisit whatever, but I mean, that's.
Well, I guess to be a little bit more open, do we want to first pass to see if the majority of the board wants to table this or not table
Okay.
this? Right?
Yeah,
And then we can take it from there. Is that fair, Judy? Do you like that idea?
I would like to table it.
Okay.
I'd like a motion.
Okay, you want to, we're just going to do a straw poll
Right.
to see if people are interested in
In
tabling
tabling,
it
right.
to look at other priorities. Okay, Dana?
I'd like to table, I could vote, I don't care. I'll table it.
Okay, Joel?
I would like to vote on it.
Okay. I would like to table it.
I'd like to vote.
I would like to vote.
I would like to vote.
Okay. Then let's vote. I would like to then just ask, though, at another meeting, if we could pull out that list of things that were on a list of if there was money left over, what we could do with that money. So. Okay, then the chair will entertain a motion to approve the purchase of the office furniture in the amount of $118,489 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Wilson?
No.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes?
Mrs. Coyle?
No.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mrs. Strohmeyer?
No.
Mrs. Charlton?
No.
4 noes.
4 noes? Okay, so the motion does not pass. We will take a look at that for another meeting.
Sure.
Okay, and then we have one more action item. So every year, the board supervises the superintendent, and every year in that position, the board evaluates the superintendent with a specific evaluation process. And I am happy to report that we have completed that process, and we have spent a number of time speaking with Superintendent Carey, and we've talked about strengths and concerns and where do we go from here. So happy to report to the community that we have taken on that task, and we have completed that. Now, some people might wonder why we're still talking about it in December. What we did a few years ago, after a suggestion from an IASB school conference, we used to do the evaluation in the spring, but then we moved it to evaluate at the end of a complete school year. So we haven't been talking about this since the spring. So anyway, so we have reviewed that, and at this time, the board would like to add additional goals to the superintendent's current contract. And the current contract covers the time period of March 22, 2017 through June 30th, 2021. So to that end, I would like to move the addition of the following performance goals for Superintendent Carey in the implementation of the current contract. Appendix A is, there will be goal 3. The superintendent shall direct the efforts of the administration, staff, and all stakeholders in creating a multi-year strategic plan to be implemented beginning with the 2020-2021 school year. And the strategic plan document shall be completed by June 2020, and a minimum of quarterly updates shall be given to the board during the development process, specifically at the January 7th, 2020 and March 17th, 2020 board meetings. And goal 4, the superintendent shall ensure that the district's governance, structure, and financial operations promote its educational mission as measured by the following indicators. A, implement strategies to increase communication to all stakeholders. B, implement strategies to ensure financial and human resources are used to maximize teaching and learning. And C, to update the board policy manual as press publications become available. So, just so people know, some of this language I got directly from our attorney, specifically stating that we are not changing the contract. We are just adding to the contract, because there's all kinds of penalties about changing a contract. So just so people know what we're doing. So the chair will entertain a motion to approve a newly restated contract with the superintendent, adding 2 new goals in the contract as placed as amended.
So moved. Second.
A roll call, please.
Mr. Armstrong,
Yes.
Mrs. Coyle,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mrs. Stromeyer, Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton.
Yes. Okay, so the motion carried. Okay, superintendent's report.
A couple items in my report. One is with regards to joint committee. Typically, by this time of year, we would have had a joint committee meeting. But as outlined with one of my goals for this upcoming year is to develop the strategic plan for the district. And the actual joint committee was the outgrowth of the prior strategic plan, because we had several committees that were indicated by the strategic plan, finance, facilities, strategic planning, climate, public relations. And then over time, we added wellness and the bilingual parent advisory committee. And so as we're going through this process, I'm anticipating generated from the strategic plan will be those committees that we'll need in order to implement and to moderate the strategic plan. But at the same time, we will still be utilizing the joint committee over the spring to elicit that stakeholder input. And so we will be having meetings coming up this spring in which we'll be utilizing that strategic plan in that format. And then also right before or right after Thanksgiving, we wrapped up our Taiwanese Sister City program visit. And again, it was very successful, and we did have a dinner for the students the last day of school before the Thanksgiving break. And again, it's always nice to hear the positive experience both our students are having and our visiting students are having. And I always make the same comment that teenagers are the same. And it really works out to be a great experience. And that we're anticipating in the spring of 2021, a group of Westmont High School students will be visiting Taiwan. We did have our first Student Recognition Committee meeting, and it was an opportunity for us to share our current practices with the committee. We had a nice cross-section of all of our buildings, various grade levels, and then we also talked about some of the pros and cons of our current practices and agreed that we do need to take a look at what other districts are doing, also what best practices as far as student recognition. And we agreed that we'll do our planning this year, but we won't implement any changes until next school year because the staff is operating under the current, what they have always done, and parents are kind of anticipating. And so our next meeting will take place in January once we get through the holidays, but we're anticipating to bring something to the board later this spring to approve. And then,
can I weigh in one bit
sure.
on that? I think one of the most interesting things that came out of that committee was the recommendation that students themselves weigh in on what the recognition program be for the future. And I think that was a really wonderful idea. And, I think with all of the great collective voices involved, we're going to land in a good place. So.
Great. And then last, just wishing the board and our school community a happy holiday and happy and safe holiday season.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, do we have a date for an update on the dual language program?
They'll be coming to the January meeting.
Okay.
They actually were slated for December, but they're actually working on a plan for junior high as well. So I'd like to share that with the board, what the thinking is. But at the same time, they will have an opportunity to meet with some of the dual language families to share that information, talk to staff. So the January, I believe the second January board meeting, they'll be coming to the board.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, are there any board reports?
I just have a couple quick ones. First of all, I definitely like the change in the policy to the junior high that's coming with the BYOD device, bring your own device. They're not allowing them to use it in school anymore. I know why we did it originally, and I know why it should be updated now as they've got all their Chromebooks. And really, I'm just saying it because I don't think you can say it enough when you change a policy midstream. I think you need to say it in every public venue you can so every parent can hear it and understand that a change is coming. Please look for it. I don't know if a letter went out, but I know I saw things on Facebook. I've seen things on the website, so I would assume something went out to every junior high parent to be ready for that. So the second thing I want to mention, really, it's just a big thank you to all the volunteers for the craft show. It was an army of people that helped on that day in every aspect, and every one of them deserves an applause. It was a wonderful day of fundraising. It's a wonderful day for the crafters to come out. I know they thoroughly enjoyed it. The feedback we got from them, it was just an awesome event. I guess at most of the other venues, they don't have live music, they don't have concession stands, they don't have students helping them, so they were really appreciative, and it was just a great event. There's one gentleman in particular, I'm actually going to name him. His name's Patrick Mansky. Some of us at the table know him. His daughter went through the district a few years ago. He still shows up on Friday night to help and set up the craft show, even though he has no more students in the building. So special announcement to him. Thanks, Patrick. We really appreciate it. So thanks to all.
I went to 2 concerts. I was curious if Laura was going to talk about one.
I have the same thing, but you go.
I won't talk about the one that we were both at, but I did go to, in addition to the concert Laura's going to talk about, I went to the junior high band concert on December 3rd. And man, music has come a long way since I was in the junior high band. They did amazing. They had the jazz band play. They had the stands up for the jazz band. It was professional. The band director did an amazing job. The students sounded great. And I got to attend 2 art events in 2 weeks, and we should be really proud of our art programming here. We're doing some great things.
I agree, and Dana also alluded to another concert. So last night was the 4th and 5th grade, it was 5th grade band and 4th and 5th grade chorus, Miller and Manning combined concert at the high school. And it was really great, and I just want to congratulate Miss Finnis, am I saying that correctly?
Yes. Finnis, yeah.
Miss Finnis and Miss Levita on their great work. I think both of them have stepped in and done a really great job with those programs. So just great congratulations. And it was wonderful to be at an event with both Miller and Manning parents and celebrating those 2 schools together.
I was very, when I went to go to this dodgeball tournament last night, I thought, wow, there's a lot of people here for this dodgeball tournament. And it turns out it was not. It was for Manning and Miller. But that was a packed house.
Yeah.
And so I would like to just say that I think it's wonderful how collaboratively that we work on this so that we can use the high school for an event so that a lot of people could attend. I saw people there that were neighbors of mine, but they came, their children don't even go to the district anymore, but they came with other families. So to have a space to be able to put on something like that, that was pretty cool. And I will also piggyback on something Gary said. So some of us do a lot of purchasing at this craft fair. And there was one woman in particular I was talking to, and she said this was her first year, and she was very impressed by the people that put it on and the students. She said in all the years of doing things like this, she's never had so much student participation. So I just wanted to say that as well to the students for their work. And then I had one more thing, just continuing to talk about our fantastic snow program. The Snowflake, that's junior high. And I say that slowly because in our house we just kind of call it the snow program because you kind of forget which is which. But the junior high Snowflake weekend is coming up, and the deadline for people to put in their paperwork is the weekend, the last day of winter break. So if you have a junior high student that wants to go to Snowflake, the packets for that are due. So anything else?
I'd like to also say something about the craft fair. I had a friend that had a table number 15, and she was very impressed. She had done Taste of Westmont and some other larger ones, and she said, I've never had students come around and ask what we want for lunch to take our order. That just blew her away. She just thought that was wonderful. And she said, I've never been in such a area where the kids are so respectful, not only the shoppers, but the kids that were participating. And she said, I couldn't believe it. I brought my husband with me to go get lunch. So, and I wanted to also mention that I went to the parent meeting on the for the awards type thing, and it was well attended, and I hope that more parents will come to the January meeting. It hasn't been announced yet, but I'd just like to say that.
I know one thing I forgot, the Thanksgiving lunch that we had. We haven't had a meeting since then, right? No. That was another wonderful event, thanking Steve Cashman for providing the funds to continue with that Thanksgiving lunch for the kids. And it was really interesting to see the Taiwanese kids enjoying a Thanksgiving lunch with our students as well. And many thanks to Mr. Kevin Carey, who was somehow promoted into, and I use that word with all respect, of carving the turkey. So that was nice to see that. So anyway, so that's it. Anything else? All right, future meetings and events. The Westmont Art Exhibition and Concert is at the high school. December 11th at 7 o'clock at the high school. So that is the high school art concert. Is that right? Am I right on that?
Yeah, it
Okay.
is.
And then the Westmont Junior High School Choir Winter Concert will be December 17th at 7 o'clock, again at Westmont High School. The winter break is December 23rd through January 5th, 2020. Classes resume on January 6th, 2020. Here is hoping to a winter that's not as brutal as last year. I'll just add that. And the next school board meeting is January 7th, 2020, 6 o'clock here at Westmont Village Hall. The chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session to discuss personnel issues, collective bargaining, student discipline, and the superintendent's evaluation.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Coyle?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mrs. Stromeyer?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we will not have a vote, right? We will not
No
have a
vote.
vote after closed.